The sound inside a tank when a shell hits is not a bang. It is a bell toll, a deafening, bone-shaking gong that turns the air into a pressure wave. It makes your eyes bleed. It scrambles your brain. Most crews bail out after the first direct hit. It is human nature to run from a steel coffin that is being hammered by high explosives. But on a sweltering August day in 1941, one crew did not run. They sat in the dark. They waited for the ringing to stop. And then they reloaded. If you enjoy stories about impossible odds and heavy metal, take a second to click subscribe. We are digging up history's most unbelievable moments, and you won't want to miss the next one. The metal groaned again. Another hit, then another. Sparks flew across the fighting compartment like angry fireflies. The commander wiped sweat and oil from his eyes, looked through the shattered periscope, and gave a simple order. Fire. It was August 1941. The Soviet Union was collapsing. The German war machine, the Wehrmacht, was carving through Russia like a hot knife through butter. They were fast, they were organized, and they were arrogant. They believed the war was already won. The road to Leningrad was practically open. The German commanders were laughing in their radios. They were driving with their hatches open. They were taking photos. They were unstoppable. Between that unstoppable army and the second largest city in Russia, there was nothing but a swamp, a narrow road, and a single choke point. And hiding in the bushes, buried up to its turret in mud and branches, was one KV-1 heavy tank. Inside that tank was Lieutenant Zinovy Kolobanov. He wasn't a rookie. He was a veteran of the Winter War. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't there to fight a battle. He was there to create a traffic jam from hell. The interior of a KV-1 is cramped. It smells of diesel, stale sweat, and gun grease. It gets hot. Unbearably hot. You can feel the engine vibrating in your teeth. Kolobanov looked at his map. He looked at the road. It was a causeway. Swamp on the left, swamp on the right. No room to maneuver. No room to turn around. Perfect. He tapped his gunner, Usov, on the shoulder. Usov was staring into the gun sight, his hand hovering over the traverse wheel. Not yet, Kolobanov whispered, though he could barely hear himself over the idling engine. Let them get closer. The ground began to tremble. It wasn't artillery this time. It was engines. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. The vanguard of the German 6th Panzer Division came into view. It was a parade. Motorcycles with sidecars, half-tracks, and tanks. The Panzer III and IV tanks looked sleek and deadly. They were painted gray, covered in dust from hundreds of miles of victory. They moved with the confidence of predators who had forgotten what it felt like to be prey. Kolobanov watched the first tank cross the invisible line he had marked on a tree. Then the second. Then the third. He let the motorcycles pass. He let the command cars pass. He wanted the heavy metal. "Wait for it," he muttered. "Commander, they are right on top of us," Usov hissed. "Steady. They'll see the barrel. Fire." The 76mm cannon roared. The tank rocked back on its suspension. The shell screamed across the air and slammed into the lead German tank. It didn't just disable it, it ignited it. A pillar of black smoke erupted instantly, blocking the road ahead. The German column slammed on the brakes. You could hear the screeching of tracks and the collision of metal as vehicles rear-ended each other. "Traverse right! The tail!" Kolobanov shouted. "Hit the tail!" The turret whined as it spun. Usov lined up the shot on the last tank in the visible column. Boom! The rear tank exploded. Now the trap was shut. The lead vehicle was burning. The rear vehicle was burning. And everyone in between was stuck on a narrow road surrounded by a swamp. They were fish in a barrel. and Kolobanov held the only shotgun. At first, the Germans didn't know what was happening. They thought they had hit a minefield. Panic set in. Men were bailing out of burning vehicles, running into the swamp, getting stuck in the mud. But then, they saw the muzzle flash. They realized it wasn't mines. It was a single Russian tank. The radio in the German command vehicle went wild. Every gun in the column, every tank, every anti-tank cannon turned toward Kolobanov's hiding spot. The diary of a German officer recovered later described the scene. He wrote, "We were fighting a ghost. Our shells hit it. I saw them hit. But it would not die. It just kept shooting. The duel began. And it wasn't a fair fight. It was a slaughter. But not for the side you'd expect. The German tanks were armed with 37 mm and 50 mm guns. They fired. The shells slammed into the KV-1's thick frontal armor. Clang, clang, clang. Inside the KV-1, it was like being inside a bell being beaten with a sledgehammer. The crew was bleeding from their ears. The concussions were brutal. "Loader, faster!" Kolobanov yelled. The loader, a young guy named Kaiselkopf, was throwing 14-pound shells into the breach like a machine. He was drenched in sweat. His hands were burned. He didn't stop. "Target at 2 o'clock. Identify. Panzer IV. Fire!" Another German tank blew its turret off. The Germans were desperate. They were stuck. They couldn't move forward because of the burning wreckage. They couldn't retreat because of the burning wreckage. They were sitting ducks. So they did the only thing they could do. They unleashed everything they had on that one hill. The air outside was thick with steel. Tracers hammered the KV-1. They stripped away the external fuel tanks. They smashed the periscopes. They tore off the antenna. Kolobanov was blind. He had to pop the hatch open just a crack to see where to shoot next. Bullets pinged off the lid inches from his face. He didn't flinch. He just called out coordinates. "Left 5 degrees. Drop 100. On the way." Explosion. Direct hit. Next target. For 30 minutes, it was chaos. The KV-1 was disappearing under the sheer volume of impacts. The armor was pitted and scarred. It looked like the surface of the moon. Then, disaster struck. A heavy shell from a German anti-tank gun slammed into the turret ring. The metal warped. "Turret jammed!" Usov screamed. He spun the wheel. Nothing. "It won't move, Commander! We're stuck!" This was the end. If they couldn't traverse the gun, they were dead. The German tanks were maneuvering, trying to get around the wreckage to find a firing angle. Kolobanov grabbed the driver's shoulder. "Nikolai, you have to steer the tank." "What?" "Aim the gun with the hull. Turn the whole damn tank." It was madness. A KV-1 weighs 45 tons. Trying to use the entire vehicle as a sniper rifle in deep mud while under fire is physically impossible. "Do it!" The engine roared. The tracks churned the mud. The massive beast lurched to the left. "More! More! Stop!" Usov looked through the sight. The crosshairs drifted over a German half-track, trying to flank them. "Got him," Usov whispered. He pulled the trigger. The half-track disintegrated. They did it again. And again. The driver would jerk the massive tank left or right, sweating over the levers, wrestling the steel beast into position. Usov would fire. The rhythm was hypnotic. Lurch, stop, fire, lurch, stop, fire. They were working like a single organism. No one spoke unnecessary words. They were beyond fear. They were in a trance of destruction. "One more shell," the loader shouted. "I have armor-piercing left." "Make it count," Kolobanov said. Usov found a target. A German repair vehicle trying to tow a damaged tank. He exhaled. He fired. The shell hit the engine block. The vehicle flipped over. Then, silence. Slowly, the ringing in their ears began to fade. The heavy machine gun fire from the German side had stopped. Kolobanov waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. "Driver, back us out," he said softly. The KV-1 groaned as it reversed out of its firing position. It limped back into the deeper woods, hidden from the road. Kolobanov popped the hatch. He pushed it open. It was heavy. He climbed out onto the hull. The cool air hit his face. He took a deep breath. It tasted of smoke and burning rubber. He looked at his tank. He stopped breathing for a second. The KV-1 looked like it had been chewed by a giant steel monster. The paint was gone. The metal was gouged, twisted, and scarred. Usov climbed out beside him. They didn't say a word. They just started counting. They walked around the tank, touching the dents. Some were shallow scratches, some were deep craters where the steel had almost given way. 1, 2, 10, 20, 50. They lost count. They started over. 100. 156. There were 156 direct hits on their tank. Not one shell had penetrated the armor. Kolobanov looked down at the road. It was a graveyard. Smoke spiraled up from the twisted carcasses of the German advance. By the time the smoke cleared, the count was official. In roughly 1 hour, Zinovy Kolobanov and his crew had destroyed 22 German tanks. They had also taken out 2 artillery pieces and 2 half-tracks. The road was blocked for days. The unstoppable German advance toward Leningrad had been stopped cold by 5 men in a steel box. According to official Soviet archives and confirmed by German loss reports, the 6th Panzer Division suffered a catastrophic delay. They didn't just lose machines, they lost the momentum. Kolobanov survived the war, but for years his story was buried in dry military reports. It sounded too fake to be true. No one tank destroys 22 enemies in a single duel. It defies physics. It defies probability. But the 156 scars on the hull of that KV-1 told the truth. If you want more forgotten stories of real people who lived through the impossible, make sure you're subscribed. This channel exists to bring their voices back. War creates legends. Some are draped in flags and medals. Others are covered in grease, hiding in a swamp, too stubborn to die. This was the story of the ghost tank, and the crew that refused to break.